How's it going, everyone? It's Marc Salino, CEO of Statement Games, back for another episode of Making Picks. It seems that although it's been a couple of weeks and football season is officially over, Nate C has decided that, hey, you know what? No football to going to talk about. I just, going to make an executive decision not to show up here. So I brought in a ringer. I wanted to introduce the group to George Cursor. George, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm hopeful that we can actually make this a little bit more of a frequent occurrence. I guess I can introduce you personally as a friend. You and I go back a long way. We've been, I guess, buddies since middle school. But from a business perspective, I guess I can classify you as an overall opportunist, an investor. You're emerging as an entrepreneur. As you go deeper with a couple of side projects that you're working on. I know that one of the babies that you're touching upon right now is a podcast called the $5 Buzz. You and I have done a lot of different things with Statement Games. We'll get into that in a second here, but we spent a lot of time last weekend traveling to some card shows. We'll touch upon that. But other than that, is there anything that should be added to your resume or title, just to give people a better understanding of who you are and what you're doing?
Hey, Mark, I really appreciate you having me on. Like you said, we've known each other since the 80s, rode the school bus to middle school and have been friends throughout. And then when you brought up Statement Games to me, I thought it was a really brilliant concept because I'm a big believer in fantasy and the evolution of fantasy. I don't think it's only the way we used to do it when we first started out. I think we were going off the magazines we found in Genefie's drugstore and just picking our kind of favorite players or players that we knew. So your game really captured, the forward thinking of fantasy, but also like the mentality of the gamblers and also the content creators, the podcasters, and the guys that are big on Twitter. So yeah, I've been happy to support and work with you. And, there's nothing better than, working with one of your friends and talking about sports. So it's kind of like a dream job, so to speak. So, yeah, I've always been following what you're doing and trying to make the signal a little louder. In addition to working with you, I also have I work on two other podcasts. One's called $5 Buzz, which is kind of like a Generation X talk radio where we bring in a lot of folks from our era, that grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. Speaking of fantasy, I had Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys come on. Some listeners might know who he is. And also today we're actually doing a podcast with a guy called Adam Levitan, who's a pretty big guy in the space. So, yeah, we talk about fantasy, so there's some overlap. And we also have another show called In the Rotation, which is there's two experts in the cannabis industry with similar to gambling and fantasy is kind of just in the early innings. So that's interesting. So there's some overlap, but really I consider myself just a big fantasy fan and interested in helping bring Statement Games into the future because I think there's a lot of opportunity as we're going to discuss over the next coming weeks and months.
Yeah, now obviously, if we even just take a step a little bit back further, of course, you have a very big profile and a big presence within the investment banking space. You've done a lot of different things in areas of business development. From a finance perspective, speaking with big hedge fund managers to general average investors. I would say from a professional perspective, your career has covered a full gamut. And just to make a little bit of a transition from that, the stuff that you're doing more from a Statement Games perspective is getting more involved in the business development side of things here. It seems like just yesterday, we're coming up on a year, and where I was just first introducing the concepts to you about how Statement Games was looking to make a transition from a B2C brand to more exposure and more focus from a B2B perspective. And we talked about how the game serves as an engagement tool, how there's data that we're capturing on the back end, and how we put together very simple marketing strategies or CM tools that give us what we feel is a competitive advantage in terms of communicating with fans directly on topics that are of specific interest to them. Just from when you compare the financial world to some of the people that you talking to today, and we'll touch upon that in a second here. Like, for example, this past weekend, we spent a lot of time at card shows in the Connecticut area. Basically, what we're doing is we're showing dealers and expo hosts how they can incorporate the game into like their brands and utilize it as an engagement tool, capture data, and then utilize that data to help push out or introduce all the products to people that the engagers on the show. But that's a big difference between speaking with the CEO of a hedge fund that's managing multi-millions of dollars in capital investments to a guy who's spending a few $1,000s exhibiting at a trade show, putting out product, and he's running a business. Just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the differences between dealing with a hedge fund manager versus some of the content creators like a Levitan, or some of like the dealers that we're talking to at some of these expos. Is there a big difference between the two groups here, or you finding at the end of the day they're just people and everybody has very similar challenges and issues, and as a business development executives and entrepreneurs, we're just looking to create solutions that help them solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, I think as the most important thing that the sell side can, I think I guess what I would say is, I spent most of my career on the sell side of the financial industry, where we were trying to sell our services to some of the buy side, which was, like you said, those investment advisors, hedge funds, etc. What we're doing here in Statement Games is we're entering kind of like a frontier market. We know that the collectibles market, there's a lot of money out there, especially in the last 2 years. We're seeing an explosive opportunity where, Mark, we laugh, like going back to when we were riding the school bus back in those days. That was probably the golden age of collectibles. And then, as you can attest to, probably a 25+ year stretch where if someone said I was going to go to a card show, even guys like us who are big fans and, nostalgic, and we hung on to all our cards and our fathers hung on to all their cards, we probably would have laughed at you. When we first started talking about Statement Games, these type of folks weren't even on our radar, but now they are. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's money out there, right? There is individuals who want to purchase these cards as an investment. So to your point, there is a degree of speculation and investment and buying and selling similar to, activity in the stock market. But I think what we're doing here is we're trying to educate some of these business owners, right? These dealers are business owners, right? They're spending time and money to get to these shows, to meet some customers and try and make a transaction. Hopefully they're professionals. That's what separates a professional from a hobbyist. So if you're a professional, you know that there's a lot of risk at these shows that you might not sell anything. I don't think these guys that are business savvy are going to a show like this weekend. There's a show in Dallas. There's another show in Philly that you and I are going to. I don't think the objective is to just break even, or I think there's a good chance when you get zeroed and the dealer doesn't make any money. So the opportunity that Statement Games is making to these guys is, look, just because a guy walks on the lot today and he doesn't buy, that doesn't mean he might not buy next week, right? So how do you retain your customers? How do you, stay in touch with them and, gather their data in a good way, where if someone's willing to give you their email address, you can stay in touch with them, engage with them, sort of in like a social media sense, but also educate them on some of the other products that you have. And maybe they're willing to negotiate with you or purchase a product from you. But also, to your point, obviously in the business world, CRMs are really important, especially if you're a small business like a card collector. You probably don't have a big team able to recall some of the interactions. So Mark, if I walk up to your table and I'm looking for a Pete Rose card, a Phillies Pete Rose card, you might not have it today, but maybe down the road you do. And if you're keeping a database on some of the behavior and interactions of what these guys are doing, it'll really help you. Especially, like I said, if you're a small business, you don't have an army of folks looking after this stuff. A lot of these guys are one-man bands, and they got to go on the road. They got to try and sell. And anything any type of automation is going to make their lives easier. So that what I think makes Statement Games a compelling case, but also it's fun. It's fantasy. It overlaps everything. If there was a Venn diagram, gambling, investing, fantasy, it all kind of merges in one spot, but it also has the components of the CRM system. And hopefully I answered your question and didn't give, it wasn't too word saladish.
There's definitely kind of like a lot of stuff there. And, we actually went a little bonkers last weekend. There were 4 shows that we attended to. 2 of them were fairly small. I mean, we're literally kind of like, checking out a show that was in the basement of a church. The next one that we actually made our way to was in a conference room at Mohegan Sun, kind of like a casino. We followed that up with another show that took place at an Elks Lodge and ended with, our last show this past Sunday in Stamford, Connecticut, again, took place in a couple of different, rooms as part of like a major kind of like a hotel. So we're starting to see the extreme kind of like, small. We're seeing the larger kind of like, events. I got my screen up right now. We'll be in Philadelphia kind of like, this weekend, networking with and checking out like the dealers kind of like, there. But I was going to ask you just about like a couple of takeaways that you kind of like store from the show. And one of the things that I wanted to, I guess, just, talk about like a little bit was from a perspective of, look, the first show that we kind of like, went to, I'm sorry, the last show that we kind of like, went to, they were featuring some ex-ball players, and they were featuring obviously an older retired manager who eventually would run for mayor of the city of Stanford. I don't necessarily mean to disparage, Todd Zeal or Ruben Sierra in any way, but was really kind of interesting to me is the fact that it's not like these guys are Hall of Fame ball players, and it's also not like these individuals have retired from the game of baseball yesterday. Despite that,
I would put them in the Hall of Very Good.
Yeah, very good. I mean, I loved, Ruben Sierra. I mean, tremendous kind of power. I think if he would have had his head screwed on like a little bit straighter, there probably could have been some more accolades he would be able to, pick up during the course of his career. However, these are older kind of ball players and things like that. But when you kind of see guys like that being positioned at a trade show as they draw it to get people coming to the event, and to see the long lines of kids and I guess, dads like, our age and things like that, looking to kind of pick up like autographs from these individual players. It's not like this is Derek Jeter. So that was kind of like, one of the biggest ways that I kind of took away from these shows here. And it just goes to kind of show when you have an event or something that's kind of like, engaging, people will be drawn to it. So I guess the point that I'm making with that is, from a gaming perspective, and I pound this issue and I'll continue pounding this message, is the fact that you don't necessarily always have to come to the table with some type of cash incentive to get people engaged with your product, your event, or anything, of significance. It's almost like the experience. So that was the biggest takeaway that I kind of took from those events. Want to get your thoughts on, is that something that you would agree with, disagree with? You're picking up on something else at these shows? Obviously, the whole purpose of this little segment here is to give people an update of what's going with Statement Games as a business. And I actually think our message from a white label perspective and positioning that message to card show, sports memorabilia, expo hosts, as well as dealers, is one that's actually resonating. And we'll be giving it another shot this week.
Yeah. To your point, it's you and I went to 4 card shows in Connecticut this past weekend. And, Connecticut is one of the smaller states in the U.S., albeit, there's a high concentration of money in this area, right? But like you said, we did everything from the church basement and the Shriners Elks Club up to a major casino, Mohegan Sun, and then Stamford, Connecticut is, essentially the biggest city in the state of Connecticut. It's a major city, 45 minutes north of New York City. A lot of money in the area, Greenwich, and etc. So, the few takeaways I had is cards are back in a big way. there's a lot of traffic. It's not just a couple of people. Like the show at Mohegan Sun was right next to a wedding dress convention. So that was a kind of an interesting dynamic, but the show was filled. There's a lot of people there. And, it's not easy. Mohegan Sun just doesn't take anybody. You have to have some sort of guarantee that you're going to get some traffic, and there obviously was traffic. And, Mohegan Sun is not that far from Stanford, and you had a full show down at Stanford. So a small state like Connecticut can support multiple shows in one weekend. So obviously there's appetite. There's people looking to transact. There's, investable money going out there. We talked to a guy, Mark, who bought I think he bought 2 RJ Barrett cards for $2,000 a pop in his pocket. He showed it to us. So there's real money going into this. So obviously there's real professional business people there. So yeah, if you are looking to get your product or service in front of this demographic, which I would say is any male age 12 all the way down to senior citizen, if you're a guy that likes sports, this is a place to be, because you're right in front of the right people. And to your point, not everybody, obviously we know we're living in a difficult time economically, coming out of a pandemic, also with high inflation and just general, not everyone has disposable income. So all things considered, we're still seeing a lot of people going to these shows. And what I found most interesting was that there was a lot of younger kids there. It wasn't just Generation X guys like us who grew up when Ruben Sierra and Todd Zeal were playing, to your point. These kids, they weren't even born when, Ruben Sierra was probably out of the game for over a decade before some of these kids were born, and they're standing on, probably an hour-long line to meet him and get his autograph. And to your point, like, look, Todd Zeal and Ruben Sierra are both players I really liked growing up. They're really good players. Like you said, they're not Hall of Famers, but they were, pretty big stars in their day. Zealy, I remember his rookie card. That red Donruss was a big card. And then the Ruben Sierra wood grain card, I think that was like 87. And he came out the same year as McGuire and Canseco and all those guys. So yeah, those guys have been out of baseball for a long time. But even with the strike, you're talking people there. So this is definitely an active market where there is investable cash going into. And I think, to your point, not everyone is going to buy something at these shows. Not everybody has the ability to buy a $2,000 RJ Barrett card, but that doesn't mean you can't have a positive interaction with them. There's, these guys are friendly. It's a really fun community. It's a really nice reprieve from, the day-to-day and news cycles that we see. Going to a card show is actually fun. The community's very engaging. And, I think it's beneficial to the business owner, the seller, the dealer probably wants to stay in touch with people. So how can you do that? If you offer, promotions or product or just fun, engaging activity via a platform like Statement Games, I think you're going to not only retain customers, you're going to attract new customers, and you have an outlet to distribute product on an everyday basis. You can't get to you could get to one show a week maybe, and if that's you're a professional. I know of guys that are on Mohegan Sun, they're going down to Dallas this week. I mean, that's a lot of work to take all that stuff. You got to be careful with it. Gas prices are going through the roof. I mean, this is an easy, simple, fun way to mitigate some of that investment risk, but also, get your name out to a wider audience. You might have some guys out, not your customers aren't only in Dallas or Connecticut. Why can't your customers be in Canada or United Kingdom? We know that people all over the world watch the NBA. They all watch the NHL. That NFL is growing as well. So there's no reason to pigeonhole yourself to just the old brick and mortar style. I mean, we love shows, but if you're a professional, you got to be selling 65, not just the 52 days that you go to a show. If you have the ability to go to a show every week, that's probably, there's only a few guys that can get to a show every week. It's a lot of work, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go ahead and kind of see here. I mean, the good news is that I think we're off to kind of a good start from the white labeling kind of perspective. Obviously, we have two projects that we are pursuing with right now. As of Tuesday of this week, I mean, we're recording kind of on a Friday. It's pretty much like official. We got the green light, and where we have two additional projects that have been pre-sold or greenlit. So we'll put out some news about that as more stuff becomes kind of available. But from a baseball kind of perspective, I guess the sports shows that we were at last week, and it covered everything from football, a lot of hockey, kind of like a product that's out there, ton of kind of basketball, of course, a lot of baseball as well, and that's how the card industry and what it's actually known for. It's baseball cards. So transitioning kind of into baseball, I guess. Hey, look, I mean, it's funny because you're in the dead of like winter here in the Northeast. It's cold. The weather is fluctuating kind of on a daily kind of basis. However, baseball is kind of a hot topic. It's pretty apparent that the start of the season is nowhere kind of near in sight. Wanted to get your perspective on the MLB lockout and how how big of a missed opportunity are we talking about from baseball when you're looking at it kind of from a perspective of, look, I mean, I don't think it's any kind of a secret. The owners want gaming. They see how in gaming activity or interaction, especially around the sport of baseball, when you can have extended periods of, let's be honest, like stale moments, just kind of waiting for something to happen. What type of tools and tricks could the industry come up with that keeps people kind of engaged with the baseball kind of product, and obviously them not playing games and not kind of being out there is going to hurt. But I guess the question becomes, how big will it hurt, and is this a significant missed opportunity that these guys aren't taking advantage of as soon as they possibly can with this lockout? Or hey, you know what, they'll get their act together, and before you kind of know it, it's going to be in place here, so it's really not that big of a deal. Just kind of curious to see what type of or what side of the fence you sit on.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that they're not playing. I always seem to tend to side with the players because the owners are generally billionaires. They got enough money. And also, a lot of times, these guys are having stadiums built by the municipality. They're not even coming out of pocket. So they're getting a free playground to extract a lot of resources out of the community, not paying their staff a lot of money, the concession workers and all the people that work at the stadiums. And, like Atlanta, I don't want to misrepresent anything, but I believe that the citizens of Atlanta didn't want the new Brave Stadium, and the county adjacent to them, they kind of just pushed it through anyway. It's like, this is happening. So I don't think building a stadium or having a professional sports team is necessarily beneficial to the community at large. I think there's been a lot of studies about taxes and, trickle down economic effects that investment into a sports stadium is not beneficial for anyone except the owner. And obviously the players feel like they're not getting a fair shake because they probably believe that, people are coming to see them, right? The Rams won the Super Bowl for the for the city of Los Angeles. Like, no one's out there to the owner of the Ram. The guy's got the charisma of the guy cleaning the toilets at Port Authority. No one cares about him, and we know he left St. Louis high and dry. So, no, to go off on a tangent, but yeah, it's unfortunate. But I think with any profession nowadays, that the employee has all the leverage. Like, look, if Trout and Bryce Harper and these type of guys aren't going to show up, those guys could wait a year or two for not playing. And teams like the Yankees, when they built their new stadium, they had to issue bonds for parking to build the stadium. Like, these sports teams have some risk. What does that mean for the average fan? It sucks. They're not going to be able to see their teams play. But Mark, as we've seen with previous strikes, is that engagement or interest in the sport after the strike really hurts them, right? Remember, I think it was 1994 when you and I were in high school. We thought the Yankees were going to win the World Series that year with Don Mattingly and all those guys. And they went on a strike and it just didn't happen. Or was that 95? I can't recall exactly.
No,
but it was
they
right
came back
when we
in
were at the tail end.
'95. They wound up losing to the Mariners, kind of like in the playoffs. So dramatic,
Right.
like Game 5, kind of like a series the following year. Natalie retires. Martinez comes over, but '94 was the year. That was the year where you kind of like had Randy Johnson, Martinez, and all those guys that were loaded on the Montreal kind of Expos.
The Expos.
I think that situation, different story for a different day, basically crippled that franchise. I mean, what baseball could have looked like if they would have played that year, and who knows what would have happened if the Expos would have went on to win the World Series. But kind of like just wanted to I appreciate the insight like on that here. Just wanted to move on to a slightly kind of different topic, since we're still on the topic of strikes and kind of lockouts. There's actually kind of been some buzz, and I got to give you props and kind of credit and things like that. I mean, I understand that there's some cool stuff that you're putting out with $5 buzz coming out here, but the one that you did last week on the topic of Russia and Ukraine was a hot kind of topic. And from a sports kind of perspective, there's some chatter about how the NHL should lock out its kind of Russian-based kind of players. So if you don't kind of mind, and I'll put all this information like in the show notes, because I think it's an important episode that you guys recorded so that other people can go ahead and do it. If you don't mind kind of just touching upon the episode that you recorded on Russia and Ukraine. I mean, you had a great kind of guest. The guy's name kind of eludes me like a little bit, but looks like he's doing some significant work over at a pristine. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the university name, but it's a prestigious kind of university. Just kind of talk about that, and then I wanted to kind of bring that up here because it looks as if the Washington Capitals general manager Brian McLennan defended star Alex Ovechkin this past Wednesday amid pressure that basically Russian players be I don't know if you want to call it suspended or temporarily kind of put on hold while this whole thing kind of plays itself out. I know that there's been like a lot of reporters that have been pressing not only Ovechkin but other Russian kind of players and things like that for some type of comment, asking them to take some type of solid position one way or another. Ovechkin's already going to come out and kind of made some comments such as, "Hey, look, dude, I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on over here, but my grandmother or I still have relatives still living in Russia. Like if I basically say the wrong thing, what do you think that can possibly happen to them?" So I know that this is a Making Pick show. We'll jump into that next year, but just kind of like your thoughts on Russia, Ukraine as it ties into $5 buzz as well as the sports world.
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult situation. And then the reporters really put Ovechkin in a tough spot because, let's be honest, I don't think that people that cover the NHL are very well versed in geopolitics. But you could tell that Ovechkin was in a very difficult spot. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for kind of being as right down the middle as possible. If I had to assume that Ovechkin, he's been living in the United States for 20 years, and ironically playing in the nation's capital in Washington. I always thought it was kind of ironic that the biggest star of Russian sports, right, who's bigger than Ovechkin, is playing in the nation's capital, won the Stanley Cup, and I mean, what is the guy supposed to say? Like, his family's at risk. The Russian economy is basically isolated from the rest of the world. There's a lot of people not happy with them. And for all we know, I'm sure he has friends and family in the Ukraine. And obviously we don't want to talk too much about politics, but I thought that Ovechkin handled it really well. I thought some people asked him some really not too thoughtful questions because, if he says the wrong thing or sends the wrong signals, sadly, Russia has a lot of leverage on these athletes and, citizens around the world. They're kind of watching what these guys are doing, especially a guy like Ovechkin. The spotlight's going to be on him. And it's not like he's a guy like Ronaldo or who else were we seeing? Was it Djokovic? Those guys aren't living in countries where if they say something that the man in charge doesn't like, what's really going to happen? Like if, LeBron James says something about the president, someone gets ass hurt. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're not going to come after him or his family. That might not be the case with Ovechkin, but the guy's got a lot of pressure on him. I think that he handled it really classy, and you could tell that he was stressed out. But hopefully all that stuff gets resolved, and, hopefully guys like Ovechkin is like is a Russian, isn't he? Some of these high-profile guys can do some things to spread some awareness and help resolve the problem, because obviously it's better for everybody when everyone's getting along and there's none of this type of horrible stuff going on.
Yep. So that kind of thing brings us into the final kind of segment and things like that. Appreciate the insights on that. Again, I will just drop the $5 kind of buzzed link in the description. I encourage everybody to go ahead and kind of check it out. But in terms of I'm making picks here, I mean, we're recording on a Friday, so we'll get this out as soon as we're kind of done with this over here. For tonight, you got the New Jersey Devils making their way back over to Madison Square Garden. Obviously, Devils, young team. Rangers, a young team, kind of as well. Rangers having a lot of kind of success, things like that. So let's just go ahead and dive into, I guess, the game. I think for today, we're just going to go back to the old-fashioned way. We're going to be playing on StatementGames.com. You can also be playing a lot of these games over on SportsHost if you're part of the test community. But for Statement Games, let's see here. Looks like it's the first kind of game in the slate. Now, Nathan controls the SG Live account, so I'm actually playing under my account, which is my username is Founder. I'm going to be joining kind of contest 1 for this contest. It's only costing me 5 coins, so I'll go ahead and confirm and proceed. I am now kind of in the tournament. Let's see here. I'll come to the table. So $100. $100 if anybody can go 10 for 10 with your picks. However, you got to follow some extremely simple rules. You have to be a subscriber to the Statement Games YouTube channel. You also have to drop a comment in the comment section below. Within the comments, please state your username as well as what your number 10 pick is. And also keep in mind that you can play as many games as you possibly can get yourself kind of into. However, to be eligible for the cash prize, I'm only accepting your first entry. So if you if you have 3 different cards and you go 10 for 10 with your third game, that's not going to count. So make your first kind of set of picks your best one, and utilize the remainder ones that are just kind of fun for fun here. So for this contest, hey, look, I got my Rangers cap on. I didn't necessarily have as much luck as I wanted from a last week's kind of perspective. I hit the under with the Shesterkin under 2.5 goals. Of course, they lost the Penguins 1-0, and a game that we wound up watching up in the Mohegan Sun. Rangers a little bit up and down, but they're playing okay. So I'm looking at it from this perspective here. I'm just going to make one pick. I'm going to lock in kind of with 10. George, if you want to make an argument one way or another, I'm more than happy to listen to outside opinions here. But I'm looking at it from Rangers are playing well on special teams. So they currently rank 7th on the penalty killing rankings within the NHL. The New Jersey Devils are 21st in the league within kind of the power play. On top of that here, looks like Shesterkin is actually starting again. I mean, the guy's the beast. I will continue to pound this message, which is he might be the best goalie I've ever seen in my entire life. That's how I understand it's an extremely limited sample size here, but that's how well this guy is playing here. So for my pick for this specific game here, I'm going to go over to the special kind of category. I'm going to lock in the New Jersey Devils under a power play goal. I'm going to leave it as my number 10 pick. What do you think, George? And number 1, are you okay with me leaving that as my number 10 pick? Is there any argument that you would like to make as to why I should be making that pick at all? And then we'll kind of go from there.
No, I think that's a good thought process. And Mark, just to highlight what you were saying, I think the Rangers are playing really good on the power play. And I would be looking for at the picks, Rangers to score over half a power play goal. And to your point, I think Igor is playing.
Is that one
really
you want to
well.
lock
Rangers
in?
are at home.
Is
It's a
that
tough
what you're looking?
place.
Did you have your eye on something else, or you want to lock in on that one?
I like the Rangers to have over half a power play goal. I think Kreider is playing really well on the power play, so I think there's a really good shot for the Rangers to score a power play goal.
Hey, you know what? Well, that's we'll just go ahead and kind of leave it at that. So I will, I mean, look, this is my account, so I'm not going to show everybody exactly kind of what my picks are just a couple of hours kind of before game time. But that's what we'll go ahead and do. I will, fill in the rest of my card, fairly soon. There's an offer. We, covered a bunch of stuff here. Update of what's going on with Statement Games as a business. We touched upon, what's, taking place from a gaming perspective and what the ramifications could actually have on the industry with the owners continuing to lock out the ball players. I think with everything that's going on with Russia and Ukraine, I think we'd be remiss here if we just didn't, talk about the NHL's biggest star in Alexander Ovechkin. And we made a couple of different picks here. So with that, I really appreciate your time. Let's do it again this week. Now I'll see you tomorrow at the Philly show, and we'll go from there. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, it's gonna be great getting back out there.
George, just real quick here, just make sure that you give everybody an idea of where they can find you. So, just give a little plug to $5 Buzz, your social media accounts. Where can people find you? Where can they, check out some of the cool stuff that you're putting out?
Yeah, if you want to check me out, my Twitter handle's right there, GKZA. You can check out the podcast we're doing. It's called $5 Buzz FDB. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, Instagram, everywhere. And the new show we're doing is called In the Rotation. And, that's on Apple and Spotify too. So if you're into podcasts, if you're looking to take a little break from sports, even though we do talk about fantasy and stuff like that, I think you find it pretty interesting. Like today, there's a little bit overlap with Ovechkin and the conflict. So, hope to see you guys again soon. And Mark, I'm really looking forward to getting back out there in Philly because the shows have been really exciting, and I would encourage everyone to do the same.
All right, man. I'll catch you guys in a little bit. George will give you a call in a couple minutes. Take care, guys.
Thanks.